Great. We are at a pretty good attendance level relative to the people who have pre-registered. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's webinar on the eManifest program, Priorities from an Insider. My name is Jim Dyke-Ice and I will be your moderator today. And we're excited that you chose to spend your next hour with us this morning. I'm going to give just a very brief introduction of myself before I introduce our two subject matter experts, and they're going to share their deep insight into the eManifest program. So I started my career about 37 years ago with chemical waste management, which Veolia purchased in 1999 in sales, and I've held various marketing and sales positions since then. And it's been my pleasure to work with both Kevin and Tom in those intervening years. So it's been wonderful here. We at Veolia, we've split the E, H, and S functions. So Kevin McGrath is our Director of Environment within the Environmental Solutions and Services Group, which is our hazardous waste management division. He started his career, interestingly, as a hazardous waste inspector with then Texas Water Commission, now TCEQ, back in 1986. Kevin's worked for Veolia for over 30 years, beginning as an environmental compliance officer and then advancing to higher levels of responsibility. As Director of Environment, his responsibilities include managing our 10 geographical branch EHS&T managers, the internal and third-party audit programs, and then relevant to this topic today, reviewing, summarizing, and commenting on regulatory rulemakings. Kevin has a BS in civil engineering from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is registered as a professional engineer. Tom Baker, and I don't have the pictures up here yet, but I guess we can go ahead maybe with an advanced one, and we don't have to hold up our hands, but Tom is our Vice President of EH&S for Veolia's operations in North America, which is our corporate entity. His primary responsibility at Veolia is to lead the corporate safety and environmental compliance programs. He spent the majority of his career focused on regulatory affairs and compliance issues in the hazardous waste business, and he's been a member of EPA's advisory board since its inception, which gives him a keen insight into EPA's plans going forward. And they just had their virtual board meeting for 3 days, March 2 through 4, just last month. Tom's been employed with Veolia for 33 years, holds a BS degree in chemistry from the University of Delaware. So those will be our speakers. You see a fourth person, that's Tom Daly. He's our environmental manager, and he will do a brief demonstration of EPA's eManifest system. So just a few housekeeping comments before we jump into this. We expect to have about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So please use the chat function, and we will be monitoring those, and we'll bring those common questions to Tom and Kevin when we're done. This webinar is being recorded, and so please check your email box later today. We will probably be sending you a link to a YouTube of this, as well as a PDF of the presentation. Our next webinar is currently scheduled for April 29, around a topic we believe is going to be around our electronics recycling division, what happens to photovoltaic cells and things like that. That is subject to change. We're just hammering that out, but again, you can check our homepage, and we will be having the next webinar scheduled there. If we have any technical difficulties, if we start to see that people say, hey, we can't hear you, we would be happy to do a reset, or if you can't see us, it would just be maybe a 10 to 15 second reset. That would be what would be happening. And I'm just looking real quick here. Good morning. Are we automatically muted? Yes. Do you have a call-in number so that I can listen only? We do not. The web link is not working. One person. So far, only looks like one person is having an issue. Okay, so I think we're good there. So I don't think we have to reload. And then just the last question, we move ourselves around just a little bit. So right now we're in the upper right, so we don't cover content. I think maybe once or twice throughout the deck we do move ourselves. So if you see that happen, the internet isn't crashing. We're just trying to have a little bit better control of the presentation and your viewing experience. And also you saw Tom disappear. I'll disappear as well when Tom and Kevin are going through the deck. And so that's just how we're going to manage things. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'll advance, Tom, and just briefly introduce the agenda for today. I'm the marketing guy, so I have to do a quick overview of Veolia. We believe probably about 80% of our group are current customers, so thank you very much for your business. But for some of you, you don't know that much about us, so we're just going to touch on what we do. And then the bulk of the conversation will be around where we started. This wasn't just 3 years ago that this started. Tom will walk us back to, I think it was, what, 2002?
About that time, yeah.
Yeah. And then also, then where are we now, right? What are the day-to-day issues that we're all dealing with? And then the road ahead. And this is where Tom comes fresh off that virtual meeting. And then, as I mentioned, we'll do the Q&A at the end of this. We think we'll have 10 minutes or so to walk through your questions and hopefully provide some good answers. I'll share the little legalese that I was encouraged to provide. Basically, it says we're not giving legal advice today. Consult your own environmental attorney. So let's go ahead and we'll start the Veolia overview. Just briefly, I don't want to belabor this. If we are, there we go. Thank you. Our pictures. Veolia is a global company serving water, waste, and energy solutions to municipalities and industries worldwide. A little over 31 billion. Those are 2020 numbers in U.S. dollars. Over 180,000 employees in currently over 50 countries. Over on the left, you can see the North America side. North America is U.S. and Canada. Almost 7,000 employees there with a revenue just over $2 billion. And then just very quickly, the hazardous waste group, which is where all of us have our roots here today. Tom has moved into corporate, but this is the hazardous waste map. And in essence, we offer a broad range of on-site services, as well as treatment and disposal services with a focus on sustainable circular economy solutions. So thank you for bearing with the marketing guy for the short commercial. But I just thought it's important that we give a little bit of context to who Veolia is before our two subject matter experts take over. So Tom, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jim. And again, glad to have the opportunity to be here today with you all and talk about the e-manifest system. Share a little bit with you from our recent advisory board meeting that we attended last month. And I need to say, too, that any comments that I provide really are part of Veolia's comments, not that of the advisory board in a whole. So with that, I think the best place to start really is some background. Really, why do we have an e-manifest system today? It really goes back to 2001 when EPA first envisioned an e-manifest system to replace what was entirely a paper system at that time for documenting hazardous waste shipments throughout the United States. The real goals of moving to an electronic system were outlined back in 2001, and it's primarily a burden reduction and cost savings initiative for those that are managing hazardous waste. So the regulated community being generators, transporters, receiving facilities, but also as part of that stakeholder group is the agencies, the federal agency, the state agencies as well that are involved with reviewing and managing manifest data for their states and areas of responsibility. Secondly was really to improve accuracy of waste shipment information. Again, moving from a paper system to electronic data and putting error checks in place and some consistency in how data is being managed and shared was really one of the primary drivers of an e-manifest system. Thirdly, the need to have a central repository, a single database maintained by US EPA for all manifest data was really critical. Up until the manifest launch in 2018, some states had required manifests be submitted to them in paper form and they would enter them into their own state database. Many states did not track manifest data at all. So with going to this single hub of data collection, it really evens the playing field and allows all states to interact equally with the same manifest data set. It also provides some benefits to the regulators to monitor compliance activities for waste generators and receiving facilities. A big part of this is giving them access to data so they have a better understanding of waste shipment activity and can initiate compliance monitoring and assistance activities at the state and federal level. And then lastly, to improve reporting requirements, we've been doing binary reports, as many of you know, activities that document hazardous waste generation and shipment activities. Those are being done separate from the e-manifest system in large part. And part of the goals of the e-manifest system is to incorporate that binary reporting system into the e-manifest. So it wasn't until 2014 that the first rulemaking was actually issued by US EPA. It's referred to generically as the OneYear Rule. But there's a couple key takeaways from that OneYear Rule that is important to understand. And first and foremost is that the electronic manifest data that resides in the federal system is equivalent to the paper manifest. So once data makes its way to the federal e-manifest system, that is the manifest of record. It's no longer a paper manifest requirement. Secondly, the scope of manifests that are being handled in this new program are federal and state hazardous waste. It's not just limited to the federal, but also any state regulated hazardous waste. You may find it surprising, but it is a voluntary system. And by voluntary system, what I mean is that it's not required that you take part in the fully electronic version of e-manifest. However, it is required that the receiving facilities do submit all manifests, whether they be paper or electronic data, to the central e-manifest database. Like any program, it needs funding. This program has a current budget of about $50 million annually. That the funding is provided as a fee-based system. So users are being assessed a fee. The receiving facilities are paying those fees when they submit the manifest to the central database. The program is 100% self-funded, and we'll talk later about how those fees are established. It's effective in all states. In other words, states do not have to adopt the e-manifest rule. It's effective automatically in all states. And the last to mention is that advisory board was established as part of this OneYear Rule. The advisory board is made up of 7 individuals, 3 from state agencies, 3 representatives from industry, representing generators, transporters, hazardous waste facilities, and then a IT component. An IT specialist is also part of the advisory board. And the purpose of the advisory board really is to provide guidance and oversight to US EPA's overall program management and direction. So the second rulemaking that really launched e-manifest was this 2018 known as the user fee rule. This rule created the effective date of e-manifest as June 30th, 2018. That's hard to believe. It's almost 3 years ago that e-manifest was first launched. And with that rulemaking, it did more than just establish the fees. It also did some clarification of, which we'll talk about in a minute here, of which shipments are included in e-manifest. It also established the process for paying fees and billing the receiving facilities for the e-manifest transactions. You may find it odd that it also did create a new paper form. Essentially, it took what at the time was a 6-part manifest form and converted it to a 5-part manifest form. It eliminated the receiving facility and the generator mail to state forms and replaced it with a single form that is a requirement to send the manifest documentation to US EPA Central e-manifest database. So let's talk for a minute here about which manifests fall under the e-manifest database requirements. Essentially, it's any regulated hazardous waste that's required to be shipped on a manifest. So of course it includes the RCRA hazardous wastes that are classified using a F, K, U, P, or D waste code. It also includes PCB waste, those that are regulated under 40 CFR Part 761 and require a manifest be used when those PCB wastes are shipped for disposal, which most generally is those PCBs that are over 50 parts per million PCB content concentration. It also includes, as I mentioned, state hazardous waste. So there's many states regulate waste at the state level. So if the origin state where the generator is located or the receiving facility state requires a manifest be used because it's state regulated, that will require that those manifests get uploaded into the eManifest database. There are also requirements for, in certain limited cases, for a VSQG for very small quantity generators. If their state requires a manifest be used, then that state would also then require that those manifests get submitted to the eManifest database.
Tom, if I could jump in here.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, we do. The ESS group of Veolia does track the states that do require the hazardous or very small quantity generators to utilize a hazardous waste manifest when shipping those wastes. There currently are 12. Those are Arkansas, California, Illinois, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Washington, and Wyoming. So we do track those and ensure that if we manage waste from very small quantity generators in those states, that we use the eManifest system.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying, Kevin. And then the last category is imported hazardous waste. So for waste imported into the U.S., the importer of record takes on generator responsibilities and creates the manifest generally. Those manifests are also part of this the scope of the eManifest system. And again, to reiterate, the manifests that are in the scope of the program are submitted by the receiving facility to US EPA's database. Generators should not submit manifests to EPA. We've had a couple cases where that has occurred, and it does create some challenges with the eManifest system because there's some duplicity going on with manifest tracking numbers. So please refrain from any manifest submissions to US EPA as a generator. Only the waste receiving facilities have that responsibility. So how do the manifests get to US EPA today? There's 4 general types of submissions that EPA has allowed. The first is what we would call the fully electronic manifest. These are manifests that originate within the eManifest database. So a generator, for example, or a broker would initiate an eManifest shipment using software that EPA has developed. It's accessible through their webpage. They can create the shipment. Signatures would be done electronically by all handlers, including generators, transporters, receiving facilities. There's also the ability to do what they call a hybrid manifest, whereby the initial transporter is signing the manifest electronically on behalf of the generator. Those shipments are all considered to be electronic. That data gets through the system, starting and finishing, fully as electronic data. The second and most common way of getting data submitted to US EPA is the data and image upload. These are manifests that start as paper in the field. So a manifest is created in a paper form. Generators, transporters are signing that with wetting signatures, as well as the receiving facility. At that point, data is converted electronically over to the required format that EPA has developed for electronic data submissions. And then the receiving facility uploads electronically all the manifest data in an electronic data set. That's also accompanied by an image of the signed paper manifest copy. Since signatures are being maintained or obtained in ink form, that copy of that manifest being submitted as an image is required to show that the manifest has been signed. And again, that's the most common way of submitting data to EPA today. Third is an option is uploading the image, which essentially is a PDF image that a manifest, a waste facility can submit to US EPA's portal. And then the last is actually just mailing a copy of the paper manifest to the paper processing center that the US EPA maintains, and that manifest is then data entered into the system. Part of the planned phase out of eManifest is to eliminate the mail-in option. So starting in just June 30th of this year, EPA will no longer accept mailed-in paper manifest copies from the receiving facilities. That's not to say that you can't use a paper manifest to ship waste to the receiving facility. It's just that when the waste gets to the facility, that data must be uploaded using one of the first three options. It can no longer be just mailed in as a paper copy. Okay, let's take a shift here to the current status. Today we have established fees. Again, this is a supported program based 100% on user fees. So part of the advisory board meeting that we had this past month was discussing establishing user fees for the upcoming fiscal years 2022-23. So you'll see on the table here, the current user fees are shown in the table in the second column. Mailed paper copies carry the highest fee. They have the highest manual processing to be done by US EPA to manage the data. And the electronic is the least labor intensive, of course, so that has the lowest fee. You'll see for the coming 2022-23 cycle, expectation as of at least now is that the fees will be largely unchanged. This again is based on information EPA provided to the advisory board meeting during the public meetings last month.
All right, thanks, Tom. Just briefly, thanks, folks, for putting your questions in. I've been keeping an eye on those. Several of you have asked, registered late, hey, are you going to send out the deck? Yes, we will. So stay tuned. I'd like to do our first poll of the day. All right, I believe it's up there, so take a few moments. What percent of e-manifests are submitted 100% electronically today? 10%, 30, less than 1, 75%. I don't have a counter, but I do see people are voting, so I can give us a final vote. We'll give it a little bit of time here. Lots of action. Well, we got a tie. It's running neck and neck here. All right, people are still voting. All right, getting slower. And all right, I'm going to close the poll. How about now? All right, so just closing the poll. We have 23% of the audience thinks it's 10%, 33% thinks it's 30%, 25% think it's less than 1%, and 16% think it is 75%. So, okay, Tom, next slide, please.
Okay, drum roll, please. So this is a graphic the EPA provided to us last month. You'll see that there's been over 4.7 million manifests uploaded since program launch in June of 2018. Of that, the greatest percentage of manifest submission types by the receiving facilities is the data plus image. So the dark greens portion of the pie there, over 80% today, current year, about 80% year running since the start of the program, are being submitted as electronic data plus an image. The little piece sliced there in the blue, the fully electronic, only about 14,000 manifests since the inception of the program, which is 0.3%, are actually being submitted through a fully electronic program from start to finish. Paper manifests around 5% being mailed in, and then image upload is about 15%. So as I mentioned before, paper manifests are going to the mail-in option is going to go away this year. So we would expect that that gray slice of the pie is going to migrate into some image only, as well as some data plus image. The expectation is really not, from our last meeting, is that we don't expect any dramatic movement of increasing the full electronic adoption in the next 2-year cycle. So not that that's not the goal from US EPA in how they're programming, providing features to the system, but there's certainly some barriers to achieving significant growth there. So again, the answer here is less than 1%. So you may ask, so what is the challenges? Why are we in the current situation that we're in today? And there's several reasons for that. Impediments to going completely paperless. One of them is that DOT still requires a paper shipping document for hazmat shipments and transportation. So even for those that are fully electronic, we need to print a copy of the manifest, give it to the driver to have on the vehicle while it's in transit. DOT is working on a solution to that to allow electronic data be utilized as opposed to paper hazmat shipping papers, and that'll be a reality eventually. But as of today, shipping paper is still an obligation. Second impediment or challenge is we just don't have enough generators registered at this point. We'll talk in a few minutes about what we see from our customer base as the number of generators registered, but it's certainly not above 50% to our knowledge. And there's some complexities in how electronic signatures need to be applied in the field to do a fully electronic transaction, the signatures by generators and transporters, for example. And EPA, again, is working on solutions to that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Probably the primary impediment really is this lack of integration with the industry hazardous waste management system. So Veolia, like others in the industry, provide waste services, have had these legacy systems for waste manifest creation, waste tracking, waste acceptance at the facilities, managing the billing aspects, very involved, elaborate legacy systems that are being used to manage the work process. At this point in time, it's been very difficult, next to impossible in some cases, to integrate those systems effectively with the e-manifest system. So that's one of the areas that's being looked at closely by EPA and how we best address that. And overall, it's really a cost-benefit relationship. I think, like anything, if there's benefit and cost savings and burden reduction to those generators, transporters, and receiving facilities, then folks will be utilizing a fully electronic system. Until that time, I think there's going to be certainly challenges to seeing that 0.3% increase dramatically. So that's kind of the current situation. Hope you found that interesting and useful. Let's talk about what EPA has been doing. So EPA has been working diligently. They've got a great programming group working on enhancements to the e-manifest database, looking for ways to improve the user experience, provide more functionality and benefits to all the users, not just the industry users. So one thing to point out is that any manifest that goes into the e-manifest database after 90 days of being there becomes publicly accessible data. So there is a portal that you can access, anybody can access manifest data and download and do queries and searches. So EPA has been working on that functionality to improve the public involvement in accessing manifest data. They've also completed some enhancements for industry users. I mentioned before that the signature functionality has been a challenge, so they're finding ways to put in place streamlined data signature processes. So those have been added. Also looking at new reporting features and data downloads to provide more feedback, more usable data to regulate to both generators, transporters, and facilities involving their activity in manifest shipments. One of the requests for expanded use and functionality has been with brokers and transporters, getting them the ability to create and edit manifests that they're involved with as a third party. Those features have been included in the e-manifest system and continue to be further developed. And then for facilities, we've also, we're still mailing back many manifest copies as paper forms. So when manifests come into the receiving facilities, we need to send a copy back to the receiving facility, to the generator, excuse me, to document the receipt of the waste. If we have the generators registered in the e-manifest system, that can be done electronically. The challenge that we have right now is knowing who's registered and who's not registered in the system to receive those confirmations. So EPA has been adding functionality for the receiving facilities to be able to better manage this workflow process. So with that, Kevin, you want to take us through some of the incentives to registration?
Yes, as we discussed, having registered, if you're registered in the e-manifest system, there are some benefits to being registered there. And as Tom mentioned earlier, we did a review of the generators that we manage their waste for, and looked at who was registered in the e-manifest system. And only approximately 40% of our customers at this point in time are registered in the e-manifest system. But what are the benefits if you are registered? First and foremost, you can view and monitor the manifest activity. Your manifest does show up in the e-manifest system. As Tom mentioned earlier, the manifest copy in the e-manifest system becomes the official copy of record for the manifest with EPA and states. Therefore, you could access that official copy, and if any changes were made to that manifest, you could access that information in the e-manifest system. You'd also, as a generator, receive an automated confirmation that the manifests have been signed and uploaded into the e-manifest system. And another added benefit, you could make corrections or see if any corrections were made to the manifest after receipt of the waste at the TSDF. If any changes had been made to that manifest, or if you believe changes to be made, you could go in and make those corrections as well. And then there are some future reporting requirements, as Tom will mention later in this presentation, of what's EPA looking at going forward. But if you were registered, some of those reporting enhancements would be available to you as well. And to kind of walk you through this, we've got Tom Daly, who's going to jump on the call here. Didn't give a bio on Tom earlier, but Tom has also been with Veolia over 20 years. He started out in the field, packaging, creating shipping papers, shipping wastes for customers, moved up to environmental health safety manager of one of our TSDFs, and is currently a corporate VNA employee. So Tom's going to walk you through kind of registering and what the benefits are from the e-manifest system.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As he mentioned, I'm just going to run through a real quick demo of the e-manifest system. And the first step in accessing that is to register with the RCRA Info website, and that can be done by selecting the register button at the bottom of this page. Once you have a RCRA Info account, the next step is to make sure that your site has an EPA ID number. If you do not, you can request the new site ID tab here on the bottom, and depending upon which state your site is located in, you may be able to complete that request online. Once your site does have an EPA ID number, then the next step is to request access or permission to the data, and that is done by selecting the Select Existing Site tab. That approval is granted by the site manager of that site, and once you have been granted that approval, the site will show up on your My Sites tab. As you can see, I have one site on that tab. If you have access to more than one site, you'll have multiple sites listed here. To access then the actual e-manifest, you will enter that site, and I'm going to start a little video here. It'll take us through, and I'll talk over that as we go through. So the first step here then is, once we log into the RCRA Info, it'll take us to our site details with the information across the top of the screen with our EPA ID number and the like. As we start to scroll down, the generator status and the date it was last updated are visible, as well as the site mailing address and the site contact. Next, we'll select the e-manifest tab at the top, and this will take us into the repository where all the manifests for that site are located. Because I'm using a TSDF as a demonstration, I'm going to select outgoing manifests, so I'm only looking at the generator copy of manifests. These are broken into 3 sections. The first is the in progress manifest. So if you're currently typing one in, that'll show up here. As we scroll down, the next section is all the manifests that have been received by the TSDF facility. And lastly, at the bottom is a listing of the paper manifests that have been submitted as image-only copies. It's important for generators to review the status of the received manifest to ensure receiving facilities receive and sign manifest shipped in a timely manner, or exception reports may need to be submitted. Remember, TSDF facilities have 30 days from the date of receipt to upload manifests. To actually view a manifest, we're going to select the eye to the right of the entry. When we select that eye, that'll open up the actual information that has been submitted. And as we can see in the upper left, the tracking number is first, and then the status of that manifest. As we scroll down, the generator information, just as we would see it on a paper copy, is followed by broker or transporter information, followed by the designated facility information, in this case, again, to a Veolia facility. Sections 9 to 13 are the DOT information, and here we shipped a tanker truck with 4,022 gallons. Section 14 is special handling instructions. Section 15 is the generator signature and dated March 1st. 17 is transporter information. 18 is where we'll find any discrepancies. Please note that this manifest did have a discrepancy due to the 10% deviation in volume. 20 is where the actual receiving facility signs the manifest. This was signed March 2nd. The very last section is where the TSDF facility actually signs electronically and uploads that information. If an image was uploaded with this, we can access that by clicking on the tab on the bottom left. That will open up a PDF image of the actual manifest. And here you can see, as we scroll down, all that same information on that paper copy. Going back to the eManifest web, if we slide to the top, the print function allows us to print the actual official electronic manifest version. The same information is available on that. However, it's much cleaner, if you will, than the actual image of that paper copy manifest. Going back to the eManifest, we'll go back to the eManifest dashboard to point out a couple other features here. The first being, there's a search function that Tom mentioned. We can search manifests if we're looking for an individual manifest by either tracking number, or if we're not familiar with the actual tracking number, we can enter a date range. And that date range could include a custom start and end date to search. Back to the dashboard we go. Another feature is the ability to export the information that has been submitted, and that can be done with the Reports tab in either a PDF or CSV file, which is similar to Excel. This will supply us with a manifest summary report based on the criteria that we will enter into the system. The last information is on every site. There is a help function as well as the Learning Zen. The Learning Zen is just videos of the actual training videos that EPA has posted onto their website. So that's a quick demonstration of the eManifest system. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Hope that was useful for everyone. Looks like created some questions in our chat room as well, which we'll get to later. Kind of how is Veolia utilizing the system right now, and what impediments do we have to going to a fully electronic manifest system? The first bullet here, the eManifest program currently lacks a functionality that would allow Veolia and other industry TSDF companies to interact with the e-manifest system at the point of shipment when we're creating manifests, especially for multiple different waste streams on a load. Currently, we can create a manifest, a paper manifest, utilizing our field systems, but the interaction with that field system to the e-manifest system, there are difficulties at this point in time, or there's a lack of functionality with that. But we do create paper manifests with our field systems, so we have the data uploaded into our systems, and then we have a paper manifest that then creates that data plus image upload, which is the majority of our shipments are managed that way. As Tom mentioned earlier, Veolia has 30 days from the receipt of that manifest at our TSDF to upload that data into the e-manifest system. So we routinely upload that information in less than 5 days, but just so you know, there is that 30-day lag time when it's required to be put into the system. One of the things we do is we use an electronic system to provide return manifest copies to generators. If we have the generator email address, we receive the waste at our TSDF. That same image that we upload into the e-manifest system, we return back to the customer. And we do that with non-hazardous shipping papers as well. So any shipment that we would receive from a generator, as long as we have their email address, we'll return a copy to them electronically so they have that in a more timely manner. The last bullet item there is the quality of data. We believe our data is very of a high quality when we enter it into the system. However, we do receive some inquiries from EPA regarding manifests that have been submitted. It's from EPA and states. Some of the information they're looking at and they're reviewing in the system is the EPA ID number for that generator correct? They have some questions from state databases to what we've been given by a generator. Are we utilizing the correct EPA ID number? Another one we hear from a lot is the status of a generator. Based on the quantity of waste shipped, is that generator truly a VSQG or a small quantity generator, or should they be regulated at a different level? So we are hearing from EPA on that. And the other thing is, we still, at certain of our facilities, although the e-manifest system is the official database of record, we will, occasionally when EPA comes on site or states to do a review of or an inspection of our facilities, we will request copies of the paper manifests to review and not solely rely on the e-manifest system. So with that, we'll move back to Tom Baker, and he'll continue.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So let's talk a little bit about where we see e-manifest program headed. And again, based on an advisory board meeting last month, the purpose of that meeting is to get input from the board to EPA on where development priorities should be set for the coming fiscal year. So, these are the high-level items that were the subject of our meeting for those 3 days. First is EPA needs to eliminate this mail-in paper process. So they're going to communicate to industry and put in process changes on their end with their paper processing center to phase out that mail-in copy come June 30th. But again, this is not something that Veolia has ever done. We don't mail copies to the EPA. We submit them as data plus image. So it's more of a background issue if you're using other waste vendors, something you may want to inquire about. The second development priority really is, as we've been talking about on today's call, is how do we increase generator registration, generator use of the e-manifest system. So expect some additional outreach from EPA through quarterly bulletins, new stakeholder meetings being scheduled, things like how-to videos. EPA certainly understands that they need to do more to engage folks like yourself in the e-manifest discussion. And part of that, again, is this features and benefits issue I mentioned earlier, showing that there is value, that there is ways to reduce the paper burden of using e-manifest by registering and accessing your data online. So several states have looked closely at the data quality of uploaded manifest information, and there are some concerns in certain areas with the accuracy of the data. So a big initiative underway with EPA is to find ways to improve data quality of the manifest information. So looking at improved edit checks with uploads and data entry processes, as well as enhanced user training to try to tackle some of the trends they're seeing with poor data quality. And then last, but certainly not least, is this integration with industry systems that we've referred to a few times. Is, how can we make a move to more fully electronic manifest through integration with industry systems that have been in place for many years now. So those are the planned priorities that the advisory board has communicated to US EPA. One of the key items underway now is a third rulemaking. So US EPA is in the process of creating a proposed rule that you'll see later this year. And the purpose really is to provide additional expanded scope of the e-manifest system and also address some of the required hazardous waste, required reporting that currently is being done outside of e-manifest, via paper submitted reports. So what that includes is they're going to now require exported waste shipments to be included in the e-manifest database. So the proposal is going to address and solicit input from industry on this issue. For example, there's quite a bit of waste movement between the US and Canada and imports from Mexico. So those shipments will now be part of e-manifest once this rule is finalized. As I mentioned before, looking at taking paper reports such as discrepancy reports for facilities, generator reports such as exception reports when the manifests copies aren't received within the 45-day time frame, unmanifested waste reports that a facility may need to file. Trying to incorporate those into the e-manifest process is being looked at as part of this proposal. We've also mentioned a few times binary reports. That's one of the overall goals, and determining how to best integrate binary reporting into the e-manifest system, looking at ways of capturing things such as the form and the source code, which are required elements for the binary report that do not appear on the manifest. There'll be certainly questions posed to the public as part of the proposal on how we want to best tackle that and integrating binary reports. And then lastly, there's a possibility that EPA will also look at ways to address how to streamline the mailback process or the confirmation process that manifest copies have been uploaded into EPA's e-manifest system. I know Veolia has previously commented, will comment again, that we think including an email address, putting an email address on the manifest itself as the generator contact information will be very useful in helping to facilitate an electronic confirmation of manifest receipt. So timeline, again, proposed rule coming out this year, finalized rule in 2022, with all these aspects hopefully implemented in early 2023. So when we look beyond to where the EPA is, some of the enhancements that they're working on today and will be working on in the coming months, again, integrating with industry systems is on top of the list. They're continuing to tackle the signature process and find out ways to streamline that and provide a less onerous process for generators to sign manifests electronically. On the standpoint of data quality, looking at manifest tracking numbers, validations, looking at PCB waste information, unique ID numbers that are part of the PCB data requirements under TSCA. Again, trying to put more checks and balances in place in the e-manifest system to manage those data points. Perspective of showing value to generators, it's additional reporting, data extracts that will assist you in managing your waste shipment activity through eManifest. And then, of course, integration of binary reporting once that's a finalized rule change through this upcoming rulemaking process. And lastly, looking at ways to increase generator registration to really provide more benefits, and hopefully it'll tackle some of the issues with mailback of paper copies to eliminate that aspect, and then also prime generators for more full use of eManifest going forward. So with that,
I'm going to look at what we thought were the key takeaways for you. I'm going to go through these quickly so we can get on to questions, your questions as well. But what did we think were the key takeaways from this? First of all, just a reminder to everyone that mailed paper manifests to EPA into the eManifest system can no longer happen beginning June 30th, 2021. EPA won't accept those. EPA is going to look at ways to increase generator registration. Hopefully, with some of the information we've provided you here, you can see some benefits to that. And maybe it'll encourage some of you to register in the system. And then, again, hopefully, we're going to adopt some changes in the eManifest system, or EPA will, so that we can go fully electronic with manifests. Again, the integration of the biennial reporting information, export shipments, proposed rule in 2021, hopefully final by end of 22 or 23. And that would be a benefit to all. And just to let you know, Veolia stays engaged in what is happening with the eManifest developments, and will ensure that when changes are happening, we advise our customers of that. So, Jim, back to you to wrap things up.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tom. It was very useful information. We've got a lot of great questions. Just real quickly, we're going to make these links available. Let me share that file now. So you should be able to download that. It says that it's shared, and it should pop up in your link or your column on the side of your screen. That way you don't have to copy them down. If you have questions after this webinar, I would certainly encourage you, if you're a Veolia customer, to talk with your technical service representative or your account manager. And now let's take a look at some of the questions. So we've got a bunch here. There was a question all right, will it eventually be mandatory that all generators register on the eManifest waste system, or is it okay to continue sending paper copies? That was question 8. I don't know if you guys have that document open, but otherwise, if you want me to read it again, I can.
No, that's fine, Jim. So this is Tom, and I know it was one solution that was proposed at one of the advisory board meetings was a mandatory generator registration process. EPA has not indicated that's the route they're going to go, so I don't expect it to happen anytime soon. So I would have to say, don't expect that to be a requirement, at least prior to the proposed rule that comes out later this year. So the answer is you would still receive your paper copies back being mailed to you. Again, if you register in the system, we can get them back to you through the eManifest system. Veolia also has the ability to collect your email address and mail it back to you via an email system as well as an electronic copy. Anything to add to that, Kevin?
Just that the paper copies, again, are going to continue for the foreseeable future. That data plus upload, as you saw, was the vast majority of manifests received that way, and we see that continuing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Okay. Can sites that are not required to have an EPA ID number still use the eManifest system?
I'll take this, Tom. Yes, you can ship on a hazardous waste manifest, but the TSDF will be required to upload that manifest into the e-manifest system, and then you end up getting charged for that e-manifest system when it gets charged back, or that e-manifest.
Okay. I had a future question. So in the future, will a generator be able to fill out a manifest online? And during the pickup, will Veolia have it available electronically to sign on a tablet, as an example?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that is one conceivable process, to do a full electronic shipment and have it only be available in the data form and get away from a paper manifest, is the goal. At which point we're able to integrate our field service system and interact with e-manifest at the point of shipment. That might be the option. Signing a digitized pad, for example, signing a tablet, or even just capturing signatures, in electronic means through the e-manifest database. They're all possibilities today. It really depends on how EPA works with industry to develop this interaction and data sharing, at the point of shipment.
Okay. And maybe one quick one, and we'll just wrap it up. Let's see here. I'm looking at question 16. Is the LDR electronic, or will we continue to have to do printed paper copies?
The only thing that goes into the e-manifest system is the manifest. The LDRs are completely separate and not a part of the system. So no, you won't have to do that. And Jim, I was looking through some of the chats too, so if I can briefly touch on one as well,
sure,
which is return copies, generators having to mail copies back to the state of the completed paper manifest. The rule changed that when it came about. Was that 2014, Tom? 2018. So that the generators are no longer required to submit a completed manifest to the state. However, some states could still require, California is one of those, that when the generator ships the waste off site, that generator copy still needs to be sent to the state, but the completed copy does not.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for sharing today, and thank you everybody for participating, for jumping on the poll, and for all the great questions. Again, thanks for attending. We're pretty much right on schedule. Keep an eye on your email box. We will send a link to the recording. Some of you asked specifically if the video piece would be made available without the live version. It's not. So just you'll have to watch the version on LinkedIn, or excuse me, on YouTube. But we will be sending a printed PDF of the deck as well. So stay tuned, and encourage you to watch our website, veolianorthamerica.com, when we announce the next webinar, currently scheduled for April 29. So keep that in mind and watch that for details. So this will now end the webinar. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day. Thanks.